Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Marvin Silver. I serve as the Associate Conference Minister with the Central Atlantic Conference of the United Church of Christ. And I serve as the Director of our Justice and Witness Action Network, our Justice and Witness Ministries across the entire Central Atlantic Conference. I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to join us for this important workshop session as part of our Mid-Atlantic Air Quality Collaborative in partnership with the Interfaith Power and Light, DMV, as well as the University of Maryland and their Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health. So we want to go ahead and begin our time this morning, and we want to first, because we know that many of you did not have the opportunity to participate in the information session we had about a month ago, to educate you on this partnership between these three organizations. We want to spend just a little bit of time talking about what this initiative is about and how you and your local church will be engaged throughout the process. So I'm going to ask John to go ahead and pull up the slide presentations so we can begin our time together this morning.
All right, so first things first, what is air quality monitoring? Seems like a pretty basic one to cover before we get into the weeds here. So for this program, we're going to be using low-cost monitors to help quantify the pollution levels in our communities. All data is going to be open, public, and accessible by everybody involved. The general idea is that we have some sort of like notional idea of how bad pollution is in Baltimore and in DC and in the surrounding areas, but we don't have really high resolution data on it, and this is intended to fill that gap, to try to give us something that we can use in the legislative process to take to legislators and be like, look, man, we know what the parts per million count is in this neighborhood, and we know what it is in the one next door, and they're not the same. So what can we do about that? So participation, for those of you who have agreed to host an air monitor, just is going to entail us installing something on your church grounds, probably with zip ties, if I'm being honest, but we'll get into the logistics a little bit later. And the idea is, while you're hosting that, we're going to have you participate in a 10-week series of workshops to try to, fill your green team in on what it is they can be doing besides this program, what it is they can take away from this program for the rest of their work in the world, and how they can, push forward as advocates for environmental and climate justice. So why is it that you should care? As we know, that sort of notional understanding, communities of color experience much higher levels of air pollution, generally speaking, in the US as a result of redlining and planning decisions and all that. So what we're setting out to do, as I said, is to collect neighborhood scale information. We're trying to really drill down to figure out what it's like in different parts of the city, how that compares to different areas outside the city and all that, to try to give us some more information to work with as we push forward for change. So moving on from that, we have logistical information here. We're going to be using purple air monitors. They're pretty common. If you are familiar with Weather Underground, that's what they record their air quality information with. So they're like the gold standard. They're the good stuff. They're real small. They're not very obtrusive. They look kind of like a CCTV camera when you have them installed. But I think actually I should probably hand it over to Ariel from UMD's Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health, because she's definitely the expert. I'm just a hobbyist when it comes to air quality monitoring. So Ariel, why don't I let you have the floor for a couple minutes here?
Well, thank you. John, you've been killing it so far, so definitely not a hobbyist. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ariel Wharton, and I'm a faculty assistant within the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health at the University of Maryland. I am representing on behalf of Dr. Sokobi Wilson. We are, and I will be leading efforts on the UMD side to help make sure this initiative flows, and as John said, to be able to answer a lot of the questions that we may be able to answer on this side. So as John mentioned, the Purple Air Monitor, it's low cost, it's pretty easy to use, and it's a stationary monitor. So essentially what will happen is the siege team or even yes, the seed team, we will be helping install the monitors. So you will not be having to have that pressure on yourself to install the monitor. We will install it in a space where we both agree that it can be easily accessed or reached. Essentially, what as a host, you would have to be just checking on the monitor, making sure that it is still working. But other than that, you can leave it alone. As John said, we can use zip ties. You aren't going to actually be there's not going to be any structural damage to the buildings when it's being attached. There is also an internal hotspot within the sensor, and it is also able to connect to Wi-Fi. So a lot of the things, it is more tech savvy, but it's still easy to understand. And we will be having essentially within the third workshop that will be heavily focused on air quality monitoring tools. And we will make sure that there will be a demo and just a deeper insight to what is happening, how we can move forward together with no hiccups with regards to the actual monitors. Additionally, if you did want to not be a part of the initiative, after a while, that can be the purple air monitor can be easily removed. One of us will just come across and remove it from the area that from the church, from the building, I should say, from the structure. And yeah, so it's pretty, I don't want to say pretty simple, because I understand things are different and it seems very daunting, but trust me, it's not as daunting as it sounds. And once at least you're provided with the knowledge and understanding, also you don't really have to touch it. So that's on your end. And yeah, I think that's covers some of the basics. One thing about the monitor is that we would have to kind of install it in a space that it's kind of clear of debris. It's not able to, I guess, the elements of the earth, snow, water, you want to kind of make sure that it stays clear of these elements, essentially when it's sucking in air from the atmosphere, I should say, to collect the data. So that's something that, again, once we actually moving forward with the installation, we can decide with the hosts, what is the best space in what you feel most comfortable with. So we don't want you being on ladders and, potentially hurting yourself. That definitely is something that we would definitely not want to happen. If something happens to the monitor, the liability is on the University of Maryland. So that's another worry that's essentially off your back. Don't want this to feel more difficult and cumbersome than it is. So yeah, but again, we will have for the third workshop, that would be an opportunity to see how the monitor works, and we'd actually have more team members, not just myself, to answer more questions and get into the meat of it. So
cool. Yeah. So just to reiterate, let's say, for example, there's a thunderstorm and a branch comes and knocks the thing clear off the building. That congregation would just need to get in touch with you guys, and you'll come back and mount a new one, basically. So they don't have to touch it otherwise.
Correct. Yes. Correct. So
Right.
Again, please don't go on the roofs. That it will not be worth your health and life in that way, God willing. But yes, we will handle that. So you the only thing, again, you would just be responsible for making sure there's debris not in the actual direct space of the where the monitor gathers the information, and just if it's actually working or not, you might just have to check on it, check your Wi-Fi, or whatever the hotspot. I'm hoping you're all familiar with hotspots and Wi-Fi, but again, we can go through those logistics when we're actually doing the demo for the actual monitor, the purple air monitor. So that's fine.
All right, great. Well, thanks for giving us the rundown. And real quick, before we get into the meat of today, I want to give folks an impression of what the timeline for this program is going to look like. So it's a little old presentation, apologies for the August 10th date, but we had that informational session then to kind of give people an idea of what we were doing here. August to November, we're going to be going through the process of installing the actual monitors on your buildings. So some of you might predate that workshop where we go through all the details on what caring for it and installing it actually looks like, but I don't get the impression it's going to be most of you, if anybody. So that you'll know enough by the time we put it in that it's not going to be a cause for concern. And that'll go through the remainder of the year. We're going to be having these workshops starting today, running through the end of November. We're going to try to stop before Lent so that as church activity really ramps up, or I'm sorry, Advent, not Lent, as Advent ramps up, so that you guys have all your Christmas time activities. We're not going to try to interfere with that, give you all the time that you can get. And then after the new year, we'll get everybody together and we'll go through the data that we've gathered up to that point to try to give you a benchmark for what it is we've been collecting, how we're doing so far, what we've learned, what we still have to learn, and all that good stuff. So with that, I think that's the end of our catching up stuff. So I'll pull that down and I'll hand it over to Robin Lewis from IPL to get into the basics of EJ.
Before Robin does that, Robin, let me just sort of welcome those who just joined. And again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule on a Saturday morning to join us for this important initial workshop. These workshops are designed in a lot of ways to make sure that our people who, and particularly our local churches who are participating in this initiative, learn more about environmental and climate justice. And today's workshop is an initial workshop for those of you who may not have any knowledge or passion in regards to environmental justice, to sort of get the basics, right? And to learn about the UCC's history in this work. And for those of you who may be sort of experts, I like to say, in the environmental justice movement, this will be a chance for you also to sort of learn more about our history, but also get some up-to-date information on what's happening in the movement today. And we are definitely happy to have one of our own United Church of Christ leaders in Robin Lewis, who is serving as staff with Interfaith Power and Light, DMV, with us today, who's going to kick off our workshop. We're hoping to conclude by 11:30. So this first 30 minutes, she will take us through a journey of what is environmental and climate justice and give us a good perspective about what we need to know in regards to this issue. So Robin, we're going to turn it over to you. And thank you, John, for your efforts this morning.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. I'm Robin Lewis. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. Can everyone, you can see my screen? Good? Okay, great. So let me move this out of the way. Okay, there we go. I'm sorry, I'm moving things around so I can see. Okay, so welcome again, everyone. I'm Robin Lewis. I'm the Director for Climate Equity at Interfaith Power and Light. Also a Director of Social Justice and Outreach for Beloved Community Church, United Church of Christ. So I thank you, Reverend Silver, and for inviting me to do this, and also John for putting all this stuff together. So let's get going. So for those of you who don't know, Interfaith Power and Light has been around. It's a national organization, although we are an affiliate. So we have affiliates around the country. We're the DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia affiliate. And our focus is on various, we essentially work with hundreds of congregations across the DMV to respond to climate change. We educate, we help you go green, we help you take action for advocacy. And we're going to get into all of this stuff a little later, but just brief, if you haven't gotten involved with Interfaith Power and Light, please do. We do a lot of work with congregations of every faith. Please check us out on the web and join us so we can share all the information that we have. For those of you who do know, we've done all kinds of things. If you need a speaker, we have a speakers bureau with people who will come out and speak and share at your congregation. We have this thing called Climate in the Pulpit, which will be coming out this fall. And if you need a speaker, we can do that. We also have green teams. We help people get the green team started. We help you go solar. So whatever congregations need, that's what we do. So let me just jump into climate change. This may be elementary for some of you, and for others, you may not know all of the details about climate change. So climate change encompasses global warming. So global warming in particular refers to temperatures and refers to global temperatures mainly increasing and increasing the concentration of greenhouse gases. Climate change refers to increasing changes. So they're similar and they actually relate to each other, but sometimes we use them interchangeably. But just so you understand, global warming is about increasing, the temperature concentrations of greenhouse gases, and climate change is the change, increasing changes in the measure of climate over long periods of time. So it includes temperature and weather patterns and rain and precipitation. Global warming effects. So we all know there are more frequent weather catastrophes, if you will, more severe weather. We can see the heat. We have heat waves, we have flash floods, we have droughts. So on the east side of the country, we have more rain and water. On the west side, we have constant droughts. In the center, we have all kinds of craziness between the two sides of the country. But these things are happening. Wildfires are occurring more frequently and more intensely, higher sea level rise. Some examples of climate change as a result of the global warming, of course, are rising sea level. We all know this is happening all around us. We're getting more flooding. These flash floods are not coincidence. And the sea level is rising. Of course, Glacier National Park, we've lost, 100 glaciers over the last 100 years, which is unheard of. So we are really doing some man-made stuff that's really bad to our planet. And as a result, we are having all of these shifts in blooming. Insects are, unfortunately, are out of season and out of sync. And I just an aside, I just saw a monarch butterfly in my yard, and they have reduced over 90%. And they are so beautiful, but because of climate change, we're losing creatures that are just beautiful and that help our environment because of these issues. Also, this is the thing, burning fossil fuels, okay? I mean, okay, most of you know your electricity comes from coal, natural gas, and I'm gonna change that. I put natural gas in here because this presentation I've used before and used parts of it, but it really is methane gas. You need to start calling it what it is. Methane gas is toxic and it's horrible. It's a greenhouse gas as well. So really, these are the sources. Nuclear, trash incineration, that is not a renewable energy, although it is considered renewable by our state and our renewable portfolio standards. It is not. It is horrible. And then we have other things, biomass. These are fossil fuels that are impacting our planet. So we really need to move off of these fossil fuels, as you all know, and it's costing more and more to keep using them. So that's where the issue is. And we all use them, no doubt, but we need to learn and move away as much as we can from fossil fuels. So other man-made activities, trash. I mean, we talk recycle, reduce, reuse, that's really important. And it's funny because personally, I recycle. I also bought this composter. It's a new composter that composts your stuff really quickly. And I noticed the amount of trash that I have now that I compost and recycle is like so little. I mean, we'll put the trash out and we just have like a bag of one little bag for the week, and we have all this recycle stuff. I mean, the whole recycle can is always full, which is a good thing. We need to shift away and watch what we do and mind our waste. And I do a thing on talking trash, and I talk about waste. And so that's something that we all have some control over, how much waste we produce and what we do with our waste and things that we don't use. Of course, cars, we got to get around in this area in the DMV. We're always using cars. I mean, because guess what? Public transportation is there. It's not like I'm from Jersey. North Jersey, up near New York, and so transportation up there is so everywhere, and it even still everybody's using cars. But down here, it's harder to get around, so people use a lot of cars. So we're on the road all the time. So these are some of the things that are man-made and things that we can personally, keep check on, right? As you all know, maybe, I don't know if you've seen this chart before, but it's getting hot in here. I love the theme of this because it is getting hot. It's getting hotter and hotter. And as you can see, from 1850 to 2025, the temperature, we will be at that 1.2 Celsius. We will be at the point where we are really, really hurting the planet, and the point we did not want to get to. So this is the trajectory, and it's happening. So, pay attention, do what you can do, and we'll keep going and talk about that. Now, I'm going to try not to keep you all for 30 minutes, okay? I'm going to try to wrap myself up, but if I don't, please, John or Reverend Silver, let me know. I'm very passionate about this. The warming of the climate. Within 60 years, you guys, hot days in the US will be so intense that the current heat index can't measure them. I mean, that is heavy. Now, some of us might say we're not going to be here in 60 years unless they come up with some kind of pill to stay alive. But guess what? My children, my children's children, I'm concerned about life on Earth. And for us to actually get to this point where we can't even measure the heat index, that is intense. So want you all to know this is where we're heading, and we can do what we can do, and we need to pay attention. And we'll get into some of the things that's happening right now to help with this. Also, this is where I come in terms of equity. There is a climate gap in the US. So people that are disproportionately impacted are people of color, people that are poor, elderly. There's a whole lot of people that are disproportionately impacted by this. It's unequal, and when a catastrophic climate situation occurs, they don't have the money to just shift or move somewhere temporarily and come back and rebuild. They don't have that. I'll give you, thinking about my own family, My mother's family was from New Orleans. After Hurricane Katrina, that was it. They all moved. They had to. There was no place, and they couldn't go back. And in fact, and I don't have the statistics in this presentation, but I've read that worldwide, approximately 80% of those impacted by these catastrophic climate issues are women and children, because they're the ones who end up suffering and don't get help and end up having to struggle to get back on their feet if they ever do. In the case of my family, they never did. They had to literally relocate out of Louisiana. Low income families, of course, they have to spend a bigger proportion. If you only have a little bit of money, of course, you're going to spend most of your money on food, energy, and necessities. And, and also they have fewer job opportunities, urban flooding. We just had a flood, I want to say somewhere in Prince George's County. Off the top of my head, we have so many, I can't remember where it was, but we had flash floods. Baltimore has a lot of issues with flooding. So does the county. And these are issues, and we need to build more resilience in our communities so people can have some place to go if flooding occurs, and also have the ability to rebuild. So a lot of churches are becoming resiliency hubs, which is something you might want to consider if you have the facility to do that, to help people when a disaster occurs. Heat-related illnesses, we have all kinds of heat islands. I mean, you think about if you don't have the shade from trees and from other tree canopy, you're going to be subject, as well as if you don't have air conditioning because you don't have money, you're living in an older apartment building, or you're living in an area where you don't have central air, you can then be subject to heat and heat illnesses and death because of it. So communities of color and the poor also breathe dirtier air. Why? Because they're more closely related to toxic waste. And we'll get into that in a second. This is what we call climate apartheid. When rich people can buy their way out of environmental crises while poor suffer. So this is occurring all over the world, but understand it occurs here. It's just silent. You don't hear about it because those voices of those communities, they're so busy trying to survive. To amplify themselves is much too difficult. That's why we need to help. We need to be there to help amplify their voices. So let's talk about justice, and of course I gotta throw some scripture in here, right? So in the Bible, God loves justice. Isaiah 117, these are my three favorite. Isaiah 117, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. And Isaiah 61:8, for I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrongdoing. Psalms 106:3, blessed are those who act justly, who always do what is right. There is justice throughout the scripture. So this is something we are called to do as believers. We are called to do justice. So let's talk about environmental justice. And this picture is a depiction of what happened in Warren County in North Carolina in 1982. This was a major protest. And the people in that community were Black and poor, and they were tired of being dumped on. So they went out there, they laid their bodies in front of trucks, moving trucks. They did all kinds of stuff to bring attention to the environmental injustice that was occurring here. Now, just think about it. This was 1982. This not today. This was 82. They stepped out there So I wanted to show this picture to show you how much people have suffered for environmental justice. And this was just the beginning. And actually, if we go back to 1968, when Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was about to begin the Black Sanitation Workers March and got assassinated, at that point, his wife and other ministers continued the march, and they did it anyway, right after he was killed. So that was the beginning. And then, of course, in 1982, I just showed you a picture of Warren County. That happened. And then Reverend Ben Chavis from the United Church of Christ commissioned this racial study. And I do want to say something. For those of you who didn't attend the EJ symposium that just happened, and Dr. Shakobi Wilson had all of these leaders from around the country. They had Dr. Charles Lee, who actually wrote the study on toxic waste and race. And they had Reverend Ben Chavis. I mean, they had the EJ greats at the table last week. It was phenomenal to see. They're my heroes, sheroes of my passion for environmental justice. That study, 1988, Toxic Waste and Race, was done and commissioned by the United Church of Christ. So we've been doing this a long time, right? 3 out of 5 Latinx and Black Americans live near a toxic waste site. So it was a direct relationship between where toxic waste was placed and race. And guess what? 20 years later, that study was redone and they found the same thing. It hasn't changed. Those toxic waste sites are still in existence. And I'm so passionate about this. I went down to Baton Rouge and I talked to the people of St. James who are on what we call Cancer Alley, which is the Mississippi River from Louisiana, from the South down up. It's just a whole row of toxic facilities, and people live right next to them. It is heartbreaking. And it's just, they've been fighting this fight for so long. So this still exists. It is existing all over our country in places where people are poor, people are Black, people are Indigenous, or of color. So in 1991, the Environmental Justice Platform was adopted. And so there are 17 principles of environmental justice, talking about communities having self-sufficiency, self-determination, and valuing Mother Earth. So please check out the principles of environmental justice. If you do environmental justice, you should know that there are these 17 principles. So I implore you to look at them so you understand where this movement came from. So this is just a chart showing environmental racism is nothing new. So the term environmental justice came after the term environmental racism. Environmental racism is, as we said, the toxic waste and race show the relationship between environmental injustices or environmental toxins and race. So Reverend Dr. Ben Chavis was the one who coined environmental racism. And that's the term that was used and has then moved to be called environmental justice or environmental injustice. And basically we're looking at, 2/3 of the population are unfortunately exposed to some sort of toxins. And we're going to look a little closer at our area, but people of color have seen 95% of their claims, and there has been claims, people have been fighting and putting their claims into the EPA, and 95% have been just ignored or denied. Unfortunately, and I hope eventually that will change with new legislation that has been introduced, and hopefully we can fight and push through. So environmental equity, I found this term, environmental equity. It's like poisoning people equally. We don't want to do that. Environmental justice, we want to stop poisoning people, period. That's justice. We don't want equity in, toxic equity. We want to stop being poisoned. So environmental racism is the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on people of color. Environmental justice is the movement in response to environmental racism. And as I said, the principles of environmental justice, please, I keep stressing this because I hear people telling me they talk about environmental justice or they're involved, but they don't even know the principles. Know the history so you can understand where we are and why we're here. Majora Carter was, and she's still around, but she back in, I think, I want to say in the 90s, and 2000, maybe in about 2000s, she began to see in her community in Harlem a lot of toxic sites, and she wanted to make a difference. So she was one of the first people to be able to get like $1 million to do something and change the environment, and make some of the environment better for the community. She says environmental justice means that no community should be saddled with more environmental burdens and less environmental benefits than any other. So just understand, environmental justice doesn't just mean, air, water. It means a lot of things. Anything that impacts your environment, air pollution, industrial sites, illegal waste dumping, mercury exposure, transit equity, food deserts, urban green space, which help people cool down, lead poisoning, also the impacts of climate change and global warming. All of that is environmental because anything that impacts you is your environment. So there's this thing called sacrifice zones. It's a book, which is really good, by Steve Lerner. Sacrifice zones are often fence line, front line communities of low income people of color or hotspots of chemical pollution where residents live immediately near or adjacent to polluted industries or military bases. Quite often, this pattern of unequal protection constitutes environmental racism. So when you hear that term, that's what they're talking about. People are being sacrificed in their communities. And, it's unfortunate, and I want to show you something, a sacrifice zone that is very close to us in the DMV. So I'm going to try to play this clip. Hopefully you can hear it. Tell me if you can't.
20 miles southeast of the nation's capital, Brandywine, Maryland, once a rural farming community, quickly becoming an energy hub for the region, soon to have 5 power plants within just 15 miles.
I'm very concerned, very, very concerned. He has asthma, has had asthma since birth.
Randy Banks Wells grew up here. She says her 10-year-old son Dallas has been to the hospital 8 times this year alone for asthma attacks.
It feels like I can't breathe, and it felt like my heart stops.
Her son's health has Brandy questioning her family's future in Brandywine. She's worried about their surroundings. CPV St. Charles just opened in March. Across the county line, Keys Energy Center is under construction. And about 1.5 miles from there, the plot for the newest approved plant, the Panda Woman. The state put out a call for these companies, citing a need for more energy. Natural gas-fired plants picked the Brandywine area because of zoning and existing infrastructure.
We think it's unfair. We think it's inequitable.
Fred Tutman is the Patuxent River keeper. He too is concerned about pollution.
Air waste, water waste, land waste.
2 other facilities have already been operating in the area for decades. Another natural gas plant and the Chalk Point generating station that includes gas, oil, and coal. It was fined $1 million last year for failure to meet federal environmental standards, 8 of the last 12 quarters.
I think this community has lacked power. By power, I don't mean electricity, I mean political power.
Tutman calls it environmental injustice. Brandywine is 72% African American. Last year, residents filed a federal civil rights complaint against the state agencies that approved the latest power plant. It hasn't been built yet. They say the plant is disproportionately subjecting the Black residents of Brandywine to air pollution and other negative impacts based on their race. When asked about it, the state declined to comment because of the pending federal complaint.
It's a dumping ground.
Beyond the power plants, tucked behind trees and lush foliage, Brandywine also has a Superfund site, meaning land here is contaminated and designated for cleanup. There are also several mining operations and a coal ash landfill next to this playground. Dr. Jacoby Wilson, a public and environmental health associate professor at the University of Maryland, warns of the combined effect of contaminants from ozone emissions to particulate matter.
Those are small particles that get into your lungs and basically get into your circulatory system. They can cross the blood-brain barrier. And these risks are really important when you think about children. When you look at pregnant women, when you look at someone who's elderly, or you look at someone who may have some underlying health condition, these communities are vulnerable.
Respiratory symptoms are the #1 cause of frequent emergency visits in the county. The EPA says air quality for the region has been improving in the past couple of years, and the 2 power plants that responded to CNN's request for comment insist that their plants are far cleaner than the old oil and coal plants.
There's another thumbs up. But I mean, they're flying up and down the road all the time.
Paul Antonioli's window screen business will soon have a power plant just across the road. So you're not worried about the health?
No, it's natural gas, which is the least offensive of the fossil fuels, and it burns clean. And there's an overabundance in America of that.
Having grown up in the shadow of the Chalk Point facility,
From my mom's house up on the hill, that's to the back of you.
Antonioli hopes the new plants lead to cheaper electricity, with just one of them generating enough energy to power more than 650,000 homes, while infusing millions of dollars into county coffers.
The power plants that are coming into Brandywine are going to probably be in the top 5 largest taxpayers of Prince George's County. They will add to our commercial tax base, which helps us fund education, public safety, transportation.
The plants are also creating jobs. CPV, for example, hired 400 construction workers, but those jobs are temporary. It now has 22 full-time employees.
Foot long, right?
Yes, please.
For John Russo, who owns a New York-style deli, that means more customers.
It brought a lot of business to the neighborhood.
It brings more foot traffic in here, more people who want
At
to eat,
least 5% extra.
mostly from the power plant.
Mostly from power plant. The amount of business, the parties that they have, they're buying, food from us, other places around here.
And Russo hopes that's just the beginning. For now, the fate of at least one plant remains uncertain. With a federal complaint in mediation, that could take weeks or even months to resolve. The ultimate impact on the region may not be determined for years, forcing some in the community to make tough choices.
I just feel for the health of my child. That's all I care about at this point.
Is it enough to make you want to move?
Absolutely. For the health of my child, I will.
Even after living here most of your life?
I will pick up and move for my kids. It's just not worth it.
Okay, so I showed that because I wanted to show you both sides. I wanted to show you the fact that a lot of environmental injustices occur in communities because of greed, because of money. So unfortunately, there are people who don't see or don't care. Like you see the delis, like more money, and the other guy, even though his mother lived right behind, in front of a power plant. so we sacrifice all the time health and wellness for profit. And that is coming to haunt us. That is the roost. They're coming home to roost now. And unfortunately, Brandywine is one of those areas that is near in Prince George's County that is suffering from that greed and that corporate interest over the health and wellness of the people. What can we do? We're doing, this is one of the things we're going to talk more about, the air quality monitoring that we're going to be doing. Hopefully we can get 30 plus or more churches to put these monitors so that we can start measuring and use this data for advocacy. Because a lot of times you'll go in and try to get something passed and it's like, well, what do you have any evidence? We've been trying to push forward for different regulations to consider the cluster effect, because Brandywine has so many of these toxic facilities and more want to go there because guess what? There's infrastructure already there. But when permitting is done, a lot of times it's only looking at one facility, it doesn't look at the cluster effect of all of those facilities in one area. So this data will also help us to measure and see how air quality is around the state versus the 13 or so that the EPA currently has that have been placed in places that are not directly in the community. So I'm real excited about this, and it should help us with our information. The other thing, this is a little different, but just so you know, some of the things we're working on, or I am working on at Interfaith, a DC lead exposure and asthma prevention workshop, and other things going on in DC with respect to lead pipe replacement. As you all know, lead is just no, and the air quality associated with gas. So we have a campaign called Beyond Gas that is also impacting people. And finally, I think we may talk about some voting. I just have to throw this voting in because guess what? We gotta vote the right people in order to push our agenda with respect to the environment. So grassroots voices need to be heard. We need to have people at the table from those frontline, fence line communities to push agendas. And we need to use the church because guess what? Legislators and others listen to the faith leaders. They do, and the people do. And it helps to mobilize the community. So we need to do that as people of faith. We need to use our time, talent, and treasures to fight for justice and equity. That's me. I was advocating in Annapolis for the climate justice bill, climate solutions bill, which we'll talk about in a minute. So here's some state and federal stuff. For those of you who don't know, the Climate Solutions Now bill was passed and we're about to begin implementation. It will help reduce greenhouse gases by 60% in 2045. There will be millions of dollars infused into the state. So we're real excited about the climate solutions. It's not as big as we want in terms of finances and other things, but if you know anything about politics, compromise sometimes is painful. And sometimes you have to compromise, but this bill is one of the first of its kind. It's big, it's good. We also have the Clean Energy Jobs Act. DC has a new buildings code amendment that is going to ban most methane gas from new building construction, which is exciting. And for those of you who know about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act on the federal level and the Inflation Reduction Act, there's money in there. It's what, $800 billion and 60 or 369 is associated with climate, and 60 or 45 to 60 is associated with environmental justice communities. There are a lot of challenges with that bill. Stay tuned. I'm not going to get into it, but just know these things are out there. God gave us the responsibility, okay? So Genesis 4:9 reads, where is Abel, your brother? And to this, Cain spits back, taunting God and us with his perverse question, am I my brother's keeper? And I say, the answer is yes, you are humankind's keeper. That is our job as believers. We want to connect with your faith community also to amplify this work. These are some things you can do. Get educated like you're doing now. Amplify voices. Help those communities amplify themselves. Don't go in and tell the community what to do. Don't go. You need to go to those communities and say, how can I help you? What can I do? Not, this is what we can do. Okay, so also hold our officials accountable. And get involved. You're doing it now, and we appreciate this. Host and attend community meetings and events and rain gardens and solar. Encourage your members to do that. Definitely start a green team. This is the last thing, and then I'm going to go, okay? But I want to introduce Dr. Jacoby Wilson, who is heading up this initiative, and many, many others. So
being an academic, I have one foot in academic, one foot out. I see my role as getting resources for the community groups to make sure that they have the resources they need to do the work they want to do. But in some cases, academia can really be very extractive. And even though people may be doing good work, the way academia is set up, we can publish a lot of papers, but those papers may not lead to change. We can go to a lot of conferences, but those conferences are not reducing the disparities in those communities. So really what's important for me is to, partner with communities, really have them drive and lead the work and understand that, they are contextual experts. And there's a reason for that. So when you work in a community where they find out there's lead, mercury, and arsenic in the soil, it's in my body. It shouldn't be in my body. That galvanizes the community. That in many ways, that connects the community back to that. So that spirit, the fighting spirit, once they get the information. So the reason why I'm passionate about this is because when we can get them the data, get them the information, you have people kind of come out. There's a transformation in the community. And because you think about it, when you get educational sort of knowledge, you get, new knowledge, you increase literacy, right? Then you empower them. And then you increase capacity, and then you have more capacity at the organizational level and the community level, then they can really go use information, apply it to impact change. But unless they know about it, they can't go through that transformative process. So it's a continuum when you have, this educational injection. So it's very important for me in my work, I'm collecting all this data, which is great. We're doing this research, but the most important thing that I do when I work community is the educational part. The educational sort of enrichment really leads to collective action. It leads to people really seeing themselves in a different way. It leads to people being more positive about the situation they find themselves in. It leads to the community members, being hopeful, being hopeful about the future and being hopeful about change. So I think, regardless of what we do as academics, regardless of what we do as researchers, if we can empower people through education, I think we've done our job.
So that's the initiator of this. I wanted you all to meet him since he couldn't be here today. That's the passionate man. He's passionate about this stuff. And for us, know that environmental justice is God's work. This is God's work. So you are in the right place. And we are blessed to have you here. And I want to thank you all. And again, my name is Robin Lewis, Director for Climate Equity for Interfaith Power and Light, DMV. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for your presentation. It's always a joy to hear you speak and to see the passion that you have for environmental justice. And I'm appreciative that you are in the United Church of Christ and that you are partnering with us as part of your work with Interfaith Power and Light for this very, very important initiative. Thank you so much. All the presentations, so those who may ask, will be made available after today's session. So we'll be sure that you get copies of those if you want to have them for your own files and possibly even share them with members of your justice team at your church, whatever you call it, or your pastor. What we want to do right now before we move on is take like a 5-minute break, because Zoom can be sort of exhausting in a lot of ways. We want to get our eyes sort of a rest. So my clock says 10:31. So we're going to come back at 10:36 and we're going to start the next session, and we're going to get into some conversation, and we're going to be led by our own environmental and climate justice organizer, John Cassender. And if she's able, Laura Watchman, I know that she's on the Zoom session this morning, just coming back from travel. She's a leader over at Rock Spring Congregational UCC in Arlington, Virginia, and she represents our Justice and Witness Action Network on the UCC Climate Justice Council. So take 5 minutes and we'll come right back and continue our session. Okay, everyone. Thank you for coming back. Let us continue with our time. We have about an hour to go. And at this time, we're going to turn it over to our environmental and climate justice, John Cassender, to take us through this next session, which is an exploration of the UCC's history in the environmental justice movement. John?
All right. So like Reverend Silver said, I'm going to be your historian today, walking you through the birth of the environmental justice movement within the UCC and sort of in a way like environmental justice overall. I learned this in the process of doing some research for this. We get name checked actually as a denomination by the Department of Energy in their, environmental justice section of their website. So it's not like we're an insignificant force here. We're sort of pioneers on this front. So Robin kind of touched on the legacy of Warren County in her presentation. I'm going to go into a little greater depth. So the push for pollution reduction and like a cleaner environment starts in the late 60s. So you get the Clean Air Act in 1970, the EPA comes into existence. And over the next couple of years, Congress goes through a long process of making more and more industrial chemicals illegal to use anymore. Like if you've got a fridge that uses Freon, it got grandfathered in, but over the course of those years, a lot of that stuff got taken off the list of acceptable industrial pollutants. However, what you still have needs to get dumped somewhere. And so that brings us to Warren County in North Carolina. Its demographic profile, the population is 62% Black, and I think it was the third poorest county in the state at the time. So it's up there. We're not talking about, McMansion country. And it's no accident that in 1979, they start to move chemicals in that are known to be cancer causing even then, that are known to be dangerous to human health and well-being even then, and were actively made illegal by Congress around a year prior. So local citizens recognizing the writing on the wall and seeing what's going on start to organize into a group called Warren County Citizens Concerned, and trying to figure out like, how are we going to oppose this? Because we have to oppose this, like we can't take it lying down that they're going to come and dump poison in our community on purpose. And so taking note of this situation, Reverend Ben Chavis and Reverend Leon White from the UCC's Commission on Racial Justice sort of take this on as their struggle too, and coin the term environmental racism to describe the situation, given that it is so abundantly clear that there's a clear racial motivation to who's getting the short end of the stick. And they come into town, and the Commission on Racial Justice starts to do some work with the WCCC to figure out, what are we going to do to oppose it? Like, if we're going to do something, we have to be serious about it. We have to put our bodies on the line. We have to really make this difficult for them to do without it having like a financial and media cost. If they do this quietly, they're going to get away with it. So how do we draw enough attention to it for them to be unable? So they cook up a plan to oppose the dumping. And as Robin said, the plan there is to do a human blockade. They lay down on the road, moving trucks in front of still trucks. And in the first day alone, 55 people get arrested. Over the next 6 weeks of actions, another 468 people are arrested, just for the simple act of blocking the roadway and preventing the pollution of their own community. Ultimately, they aren't able to defeat the effort, and so the landfill does go into place. But they managed to light a fire that people see all around the country. This gets an awful lot of media attention. There's a whole mess of archived news articles from like the New York Times and the Washington Post and all these, big premier news outlets from back in the day, documenting the situation and, giving regular updates, keeping track of the arrest count, and just getting the word out to the wider world. And as a result of that, communities around the country take note and they look around at what their lived experience is, where they live, and notice the same trend. And so they start to organize themselves. In 1987, as a result of several years worth of work and consideration, the Commission on Racial Justice puts out Toxic Waste and Race in the United States, which is like a groundbreaking, earth-shattering report. Nobody's done this kind of work up to that point to connect the dots on what's happening, where it's happening, who it's happening to, and what the impact is. So what they find is that 3 in 5 Black and Latinx Americans at the time lived in a community housing what the EPA referred to as an uncontrolled toxic waste site. So that's a formerly active industrial site that's been abandoned and remains unused, but is still leaching toxins into the community around it. Alternatively, it's also places where you dump things like PCBs in Warren County. And the real damning thing is that the EPA knows this. We're talking about an institution that at that point is 17 years old. They've been at this for almost 20 years. They know that these places are dangerous. They know that they're killing people on the regular, and they're not doing anything about it. So putting that information out there and drawing the negligence part in is rather significant there. And 20 years later, they update the report. Then that, another 20 years later, there's more to learn. There's more money to be had for the report. There's more time and effort to put into the effort. And what they find is that not only does the problem exist as they understood, but it's actually much worse. The number of people living within 2 miles of a facility that posed a known risk is higher than they counted in '87. Not necessarily because it's grown, but just because their means weren't there to do the statistical work that they would have had to do. And that the majority of people nationally within the radius of these facilities are people of color. It's not just that it's 3 out of 5, it's that it's 3 out of 5 and they constitute the majority of people being poisoned actively. And the other important thing that they find is that these facilities aren't just, placed haphazardly, they're clustered together. So if you're the neighbor to one uncontrolled waste site, you're the neighbor to multiple uncontrolled waste sites. To give a couple offhand examples from where I grew up in the Philly area, Chester County, outside of the city of Philadelphia, is 82% white. The city of Chester is 70% Black. If you look for where garbage dumps are, if you look for where incinerators are, if you look for where power plants are, basically, if you're looking for a smokestack belching out stuff that's going to kill you, you're going to find it in the city of Chester, not in Chester County, where all the white folks live. To give another one, it's frequently a problem that these happen next to military sites. I grew up near a naval air station that a couple of years ago they figured out was leaching fire retardant chemicals into the water table. And so the people living directly around the base end up with thyroid cancer, liver cancer, bone cancer. And it might shock you to learn that next to a naval air station, the noise pollution means that the property values are real low, which means the people living around the base getting poisoned actively are fairly poor. So this stuff goes on all over the place. That's just 2 easy offhand examples, but it's to use Brandywine as another one. And I'm sure you can rattle off a fair few. Tom's River in the New York area. This happens regularly, and it happens without any real consequence a lot of the time. And it's a rampant problem that's still ongoing 15 years after this report. So in the time between those 2 reports, Reverend Chavis didn't really stop his work. They convened the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in 1991, drawing representatives from all 50 states, several indigenous nations, and broadly speaking, colonized places that America holds sway over, like Puerto Rico, Chile, Mexico, the Marshall Islands. And so they get together to work out what is our collective understanding of what environmental justice means to us as the people on the receiving end of environmental injustice. And so they go about adopting those 17 principles Robin talked about. And I'd like, if you guys will bear with me, read through that document, because I think it's important for us as people in the UCC and people who are followers to the legacy that this is all setting down, to actually understand what it is we've said, what it is we've put on paper, what it is we have espoused we believe once upon a time and still hold now. So to get into it, we, the people of color, gathered together at this multinational People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit to begin to build a national and international movement of all peoples of color to fight the destruction and taking of our lands and communities, do hereby reestablish our spiritual interdependence to the sacredness of our Mother Earth, to respect and celebrate each of our cultures, languages, and beliefs about the natural world and our roles in healing ourselves, to ensure environmental justice, to promote economic alternatives which would contribute to the development of environmentally safe livelihoods, and to secure our political, economic, and cultural liberation that has been denied for over 500 years of colonization and oppression, resulting in the poisoning of our communities and land and the genocide of our peoples, to affirm and adopt these principles of environmental justice. Principle 1. Environmental justice affirms the sacredness of Mother Earth, ecological unity, and the interdependence of all species, and the right to be free from ecological destruction. 2. Environmental justice demands that public policy be based on mutual respect and justice for all peoples, free from any form of discrimination or bias. 3. Environmental justice mandates the right to ethical, balanced, and responsible uses of land and renewable resources in the interests of a sustainable planet for humans and other living things. 4. Environmental justice calls for universal protection from nuclear testing and the extraction, production, and disposal of toxic or hazardous wastes and poisons that threaten the fundamental right to clean air, land, water, and food. Number 5. Environmental justice affirms the sacredness of Mother Earth, ecological unity, and the interdependence of all species, and the right to be free from ecological destruction. 6. Environmental justice demands the cessation of the production of all toxins, hazardous wastes, and radioactive materials, and that all past and current producers be held responsible or strictly accountable to the people for detoxification and the containment at the point of production. 7. Environmental justice demands the right to participate as equal partners at every level of decision-making, including needs assessment, planning, implementation, enforcement, and evaluation. 8. Environmental justice affirms the right of all workers to a safe and healthy work environment without being forced to choose between an unsafe livelihood and unemployment. It also affirms the right of those who work at home to be free from environmental hazards. 9. Environmental justice protects the right of victims of environmental injustice to receive full compensation and reparations for damages as well as quality health care. 10. Environmental justice considers governmental acts of environmental injustice a violation of international law, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, and the United Nations Convention on Genocide. 11. Environmental justice must recognize a special legal and natural relationship of Native peoples to the U.S. government through treaties, agreements, compacts, and covenants, affirming sovereignty and self-determination. 12. Environmental justice affirms the need for urban and rural ecological policies to clean up and rebuild our cities and rural areas in balance with nature, honoring the cultural integrity of all our communities and providing fair access for all to the full range of resources. 13. Environmental justice calls for the strict enforcement of principles of informed consent and a halt to the testing of experimental reproductive and medical procedures and vaccinations on people of color. 14. Environmental justice opposes the destructive operations of multinational corporations. 15. Environmental justice opposes military occupation, repression, and exploitation of lands, peoples, and cultures, and other life forms. 16. Environmental justice calls for the education of present and future generations, which emphasizes social and environmental issues based on our experience and an appreciation of our diverse cultural perspectives. 17. Environmental justice requires that we as individuals make personal and consumer choices to consume as little of Mother Earth's resources and to produce as little waste as possible. and make the conscious decision to challenge and reprioritize our lifestyles to ensure the health of the natural world for present and future generations. And so the reason I read through all that is I want people to walk away from this without thinking that this is all a personal responsibility argument, because that's not what this is. When we're talking about environmental justice, when we're talking about climate justice, and when we're talking about climate change and environmental degradation, those are systemic problems. Those are things caused not by the fact that you don't compost or the fact that you drive your car to work or any of those things. It's caused by the fact that you don't have any option but to drive your car to work. You don't have any option but to turn on your power outlet and to use coal-fired power plants to produce that energy. It's that you don't have the choice in a lot of places to recycle. I mean, it goes unsaid a lot of the time, but municipal recycling programs don't always actually recycle what you put in that special bin. A lot of the time it goes into a landfill. It's just an extra layer of abstraction between you're putting it in the bin and where it goes. When we're pushing for these things, when we're talking about achieving environmental and climate justice, it's not just things that you can do personally. It's about things that you can do to push governments that have the means to change structural features of society to better reflect our needs and to better meet the needs that already exist for restorative work. You know, like the climate is in crisis and environmental systems are in decline, and those things are going to have to not just be halted, but actively restored. Every damaged forest is going to have to be replanted. All of those species on the endangered species list are going to have to be protected until such a point that they don't need to be protected anymore. And as much as I might like to be able to do that myself, I don't have the power for that, and neither do you individually. But operating as a collective and working in a collective manner, we can push for those things to get the institutions that do have the means and the opportunity to do the things that we need in order to make life livable for the generations to follow us. So that soapbox moment finished. Since the reports were published, we haven't really continued our work. We just haven't followed the same avenue that we were before, throwing ourselves in front of dump trucks and issuing sweeping statements about what environmental justice is. We try to take some more nuanced and finer focused approaches. So in 2013, at the national level, the UCC passed a resolution to divest from fossil fuel companies. So all of the money that we have invested, the idea is at some point in the not too distant future, will be pulled out altogether from fossil fuel companies. The work has been a little slow so far because it's a voluntary program. So we have 138 out of 4,794 congregations signed up. For those of them that are not yet signed up, there is a focus on shareholder activism. So like if you have a congregation that holds assets in a fossil fuel company, the United Church Fund has taken an attitude of opposition toward those companies to try to hold their feet to the fire a little bit and force them to be accountable for the stuff that they do, knowing that it's a problem. Like, I mean, let's not forget, ExxonMobil knows that climate change exists. They were one of the high funders for climate research in the late 70s and the 80s. They did a lot of that groundbreaking work at the outset of the climate science project, but not, out of the kindness of their hearts. It's a little bit disingenuous to consider it that way. These people know and have known for a long time that the way that they make their money damages the world around them, possibly irreparably, and kills a lot of people in the process. So it seems like it ought to be our job as the people who have, shares in their companies to demand that they own that a little more. And so for those who have not fully divested, that is the approach. But I think the United Church Fund is appropriately frank on the matter that for as big as we are and as important as we feel ourselves to be, we do not hold enough fossil fuel assets to meaningfully impact profitability. What we're doing here is being a nuisance. It's a nuisance for a good cause, but ultimately our choice to divest or our choice to pursue shareholder activism isn't going to bankrupt Royal Dutch Shell. At the very least, it's going to make them account for what they do on a public space, but that only goes so far. And so, pushing beyond that, there's a sort of grassroots movement to create what we call creation justice churches. It's a process by which churches sort of figure out what their niche is and how they're going to pursue justice for God's creation in their own way, in their own place, in their own time. And we have a couple people who are here today who are already part of that. So I'd like to offer them the stage in a little while. Partially because as much as I can talk about what it is we're doing, I think it's probably worthwhile to give the floor to people who are actually doing the work. You know, if we're going to talk about where we are and where we're going, it's going to be you guys who do it. You know, like I'm happy to be organizing, but at the end of the day, it's the congregations and the local churches out there who are going to be doing the hard work at the local level. Before I open up that floor, I want to close on a quote from Reverend Ben Chavis that I think really gets at the point that I'm trying to get across here. The issue of environmental racism is an issue of life and death. It's just not an issue of some form of prejudice where someone doesn't like you because of the color of your skin. This is an issue that will take your life away if you don't get involved. And I think it's important to bear that in mind because it's much easier to ignore that as a systemic problem than it is for, you know, police violence or any of these real in-your-face things where they happen, they're traumatic, you notice. It's much more difficult to get people to notice and to stay invested in the slow-going, long process of, you know, poisoning a community and targeting them for that poisoning. You know, it's not quite as instant, it's not quite as egregious, and human psychology doesn't do really well with long-term problems, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. We got to stay active, we got to stay focused, and we have to actively pursue justice for people who are at the receiving end of injustice. It's our calling, it's our duty. And Reverend Silver is going to get into that a little bit more about, you know, our duty as Christians to do this, not just our duty as people. Because we do have both, I got to stress that. So all that being said, I want to open the floor up a little bit and give people who are here in the audience to not be in the audience for a minute. So if there's anybody who would like to have a minute to talk about what they're doing in their congregation and the work that they're involved in, feel free to just hit the raise hand button and hop on screen. I'll open it up to you guys.
John, it may be good to take the slides down so that we can see
Oh
everybody.
yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Let me.
Sure, great.
Sorry about that, guys. All right, Ina, why don't you take the stage?
Hi, I'm Ina Isobe. I'm a member of Union Congregational Church in Montclair, New Jersey. I recognize some of your faces. Yes, it's so nice to be here this morning with old friends and I hope new friends. My congregation is exploring becoming a creation justice church. That means we're working with Brooks Burnt, our national staff person for environmental issues. And we've done a lot of what could be called the easy, you know, the low-hanging fruit, or as an activist in Hawaii, where I'm originally from, said the easy reach mango. And, you know, a lot of what Robin Lewis was saying resonated very strongly with me. We talk about Newark, New Jersey as containing sacrifice zones. Montclair, being an affluent community, does not entirely escape some of the environmental issues that New Jersey is just completely full of. Montclair has a Superfund site, but our site was remediated. Other communities, not so much. So within my congregation, people respond very strongly to the personal and consumer choice issues. And I think we do need quite a bit of education on the sort of broader and justice issues. That's something that we need to move toward. And because we are a congregation that has significant resources, we've seen progress in things like installing solar panels. And we're blessed to have an investment portfolio. So we've examined that and changing some of the things, the ways that we invest. Other things, looking at how we care and use the church campus. So less toxic lawn care, planting native plants, devoting part of the church property to raising food that goes to a local feeding program. That all makes sense to people. We've looked at how we do coffee hour, trying to reduce the use of disposables. And then we kind of bump into some difficulties. I mean, we did do some advocacy for the Inflation Reduction Act. That's kind of new for our congregation, especially since behind the scenes we were aware that our senior senator was dragging his feet on committing to it. So we've talked about the medicinal value of plants. We've had a climate intern, one of the climate interns, and that I think both for our intern and for the congregation involved a lot of education, which I think will have great benefits in the future. So that's an investment. So we work with partners, particularly the Northeast Earth Coalition and Empower New Jersey. And I think it would be really helpful since I feel like there is a movement building if we could work with other New Jersey churches. So that's something we need to examine. I think one of our other stumbling blocks is there's sometimes a tendency to see justice work, that environmental justice is in competition with other justice movements. And that is not the case, that all of these issues are just inextricably intertwined. So just bringing that all together, I think is that together sense is what we need to work on. We also have the church has always been involved in various things, maybe in a sort of less connected way. So sometimes we're dealing with climate change denial. We're also dealing with climate change anxiety and the tendency to become apathetic or becoming helpless. So just bringing that all together, a new concern that's just kind of on the radar screen is the need to confront eco-fascism. This is environmentalism with a white nationalist racist bent. And I think that's a particular responsibility for a church like Union Church in Montclair. Oh, thank you, Robin. Thank you. Yes, East Orange. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing it. That's all good stuff for us to bear in mind. I hope folks were taking notes because you guys are certainly doing an awful lot of work up there. I know, Laura, you had something you wanted to say real quick before we got too far along. Let me let you hop in here and speak on it for a second.
Sure. Thanks, John. I just want to introduce myself as well. I'm glad that a little bit of discussion is going here. Really glad to hear about the work in New Jersey. I am here in Arlington, Virginia. I am a layperson at Rock Spring United Church of Christ. We've done a lot of greening initiatives as well, including installing solar panels and going for a net zero energy use. And so, but I'm mainly here today because I am the delegate from the Central Atlantic Conference to the National Council on Climate Justice, which Brooks Burnt runs. And I just wanted to make sure folks are aware of that. I think that this group is a wonderful group and can, through collective action, also I can, relay that to the National Council, and with that collective action, get even more done. So whether it's advocacy on federal priorities or the fellowship grant program that we've started that Ina referenced, of trying to get climate justice fellows into different UCC churches, and also trying to hold the UCC's feet to the fire on divestment as well. And so there's a variety of things going on, but I'm really encouraged that this group is getting together, getting educated, getting organized, and that we can work, at the national level as well.
Great. And I see one other raised hand from Rebecca Schillingberg. So why don't you hop in here and share with the group?
I just want to share that ERUCC is a creation justice church. And for those who feel like you have to have solar panels to do it, it's a wonderful thing to do. We have yet to do that, but it's on our horizon. And we have a very active green team led by Linda Coyle, who's on the Zoom call. And we have done things like we compost or wash, we either wash dishes, use real dishes, or compost a lot of stuff. We hire a place to come pick up our compost at the church so that everything that can be composted is. But there are a lot of things we're working on, moving to change out planting and put in more native plants. And this is one effort in our green team and our creation justice commitment that we're doing.
All right, I don't see any other hands raised, and I don't want to eat up any more of what should be Reverend Silver's time. So why don't I move us along, and I'll pull those slides back up for you, Reverend Silver.
Thank you. Before I begin my time, I want to just see if there are any other questions or thoughts that folks have that they may want to share. I know that we've shared a lot with you. I'm glad to hear the stories and the work of some of our congregations that are doing so far. We just wanted to give that moment in space before I move us on. Don't be shy. No? Okay. Thanks, John, for pulling those slides up. Appreciate it. So, in all that we do as people of faith, as the church, it's very important that we ground the work that we do in a biblical and theological understanding of what it means to be people of faith, what it means to be a people of Jesus, as I like to say, but also a people of justice. And I think Robin, in her presentation, sort of started the conversation by lifting up some scriptures that really spoke definitively to that we are called to be people of justice as people of faith. I know that oftentimes in our congregations, we have different perspectives in regards to what it means to do the work of justice. Sometimes it comes across as if it's being too political, but as I think we've learned here in a number of ways this morning, politics is about power, understanding power, and having the ability to use that power to bring about the change in your community. That's what politics is really all about. We oftentimes reduce it to political parties such as Democrats, Republicans, and independents. But politics is so much more in that. It's about the struggle for power. It's about how do we use power to create systems, to create a community that serves all of us and not threatens communities, not threaten people who oftentimes experience injustice in our world and our community. In particular, when you talk about environmental and climate justice, from the birth of the environmental justice movement in the 1980s, United Church of Christ has been actively engaged and has been making a profound difference in caring for God's creation. And in the context of our biblical and theological understanding of what it means to be people of justice. I mean, Genesis points out that this is one of our first callings, that we are called to take care of God's creation. And if there's something that should bring us together in a common cause, it should be this one thing. And it's more than just about air and water. It's about so much more. It's already been talked about. It's also what Jesus would do, to use that old saying, what would Jesus do? It's what would Jesus would do. And even the Apostle Paul in many of his letters spells out how Jesus sought to put right the broken covenantal relationship between God and all of creation, not just us as humans, which we tend to lift ourselves up above other parts of God's creation, but all of creation, the land, and so many other creatures. It's about justice. As Christians, we are called to seek justice. We're called to be in right relationship with God, with our neighbors, and all of creation. And from racial inequities to the ongoing legacy of colonialism, creation justice is deeply intertwined with multiple matters of justice. And I think it's critically important that we understand that this work of environmental climate justice, as John did an excellent job in laying out, this is a part of who we are as the United Church of Christ. Our work goes far back to one of our old national ministries called the Commission for Racial Justice. It was the central organization that led the denomination's effort in racial justice work within communities across the country. Next slide, please. And then finally, I wanted to lift up this scripture here and a quote from John as we prepare for today's conversation. In Leviticus chapter 25, it reads, "The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine. You are but aliens and my tenants. Throughout the country that you hold as possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land." For the redemption of the land. I believe in this time where there's so much environmental degradation, ongoing environmental catastrophe that's taking place across not just our country, but throughout the globe. This is our mission, the redemption of the land. And John, in preparing for our time for this day, shared this quote with me: that caring for the land is not just our duty prescribed by God. It's our responsibility as temporary tenants of all land. We don't own it. God owns it. We just get the distinct honor of enjoying and caring for it for a while. What a great quote. Thank you, John. Next slide. So here in the Central Atlantic Conference, going back as far as 2019, we launched a new ministry called the Justice and Witness Action Network. And this is a new way in which we are doing justice and witness ministries across the entire conference. We're trying to bring together local churches, clergy, and justice leaders, individual members who are in the pews, to come together to organize power to bring about a just and compassionate world for all. And as part of our structure and work that we're doing, we're trying to build not just relationships, which is critically important. And we're hopefully doing that today by bringing all of you together in the context of this workshop. But we're trying to build community across our state regions, because the conference covers many states, about 5 states total, as well as our associations, so that we're building community around passions that we collectively have to do ministry. And one of that is justice. And one of those in particular, as we see today, is environmental and climate justice work. So the way we're organizing the Justice and Witness Action Network, we're organized by state in terms of bringing people together to bring about change in their state community. But we're also trying to do that around issues. And as you see, we have a number of leaders, clergy, and churches across the entire conference. We have 160 plus churches. And although we don't know all of what our churches are doing, what we're trying to do is find opportunities to bring people together to learn one another, to build community with one another, and bring together our collective gifts of time, talent, and treasure and passion to do this work to have a greater impact. Yes, I believe in the power of one, but I also believe in the power of many, the ability for us to bring our collective resources together to bring about the change necessary that we want to see and that so many people in our communities desperately need. So as part of this overall initiative in working with Interfaith Power and Light and the University of Maryland's Center, we are trying to build an environmental and climate justice here in the Central Atlantic Conference as part of our Justice and Witness Action Network. We are already starting to do that and have been trying to do that, particularly in Maryland. During this last legislative session this year, we joined the Maryland Campaign for Environmental Human Rights. We're hoping to continue to do that work as we move into next year and in 2024. The campaign is going to focus a lot of its efforts next year on doing education across the state on the importance of passing an environmental human rights amendment to the Maryland Constitution. And because there's a process in amending the Maryland State Constitution, you have to then take it to the people to the ballot for a ballot initiative. So this is one of our goals. And for those Maryland leaders, clergy, and representatives of local churches who are here today, we hope that you would join us as part of this effort. That could be the additional work that you do in addition to the work that you're doing locally in and around your community where your church building is located. We already talked about building the relationships across our local churches and making this issue a priority. Again, we were happy that through our relationships with Lancaster Seminary, John is working with us as part of his field placement, and we have one of our own leaders in Laura Watchman, who is representing our collective work on the UC Council for Climate Justice. And then we cannot ignore Robin Lewis out there in the broader community working for IPL and being a support to our work as we partner with like-minded individuals and organizations to do this work, because no one organization can do this work alone. Next slide, please. So the Faith and Democracy campaign is a campaign that was launched back in 2020, and we launched our 2022 campaign earlier this year. This is our initiative to engage the entire network in what we like to call a nonpartisan civic engagement work, which is to make sure that people understand the importance of participating in the electoral process, making sure that they're registered to vote, making sure that they are knowledgeable about the issues that are critical to the upcoming election, empowering them with information so that they can participate in the process, encouraging them to go and vote, that's get out the vote, engaging in election protection, making sure that they can go to the polls on election day or in early voting, since that has happened in a lot of our jurisdictions, that they can go and actually cast their vote. And then also combining that with our network, who has voted back in 2021 to do this work on the federal level, which is to make sure we strengthen voting rights legislation in Congress, as well as work on combating voter suppression, which so many communities, and particularly communities of color, experience across the country, and particularly in our own backyard here in the conference as a whole. This campaign is organized around faith and democratic principles of valuing and affirming the voice and dignity of all, especially the least of these among us, and the belief that every person has a right to participate fully, freely, and fairly in the democratic process without fear, intimidation, limitations, or false information. Yes, John, pull up the website again. I know you did that by accident, but yeah, go ahead and pull that up.
Sorry, I froze up. Did you cue me for the next slide?
Click on that link there. I want to just show people the website real quick.
Gotcha.
So this is our Justice and Witness Action Network website. This is the Faith and Democracy 2022 campaign page. So you can go there and learn more about the campaign, some of the initiatives that we're currently engaging in. So John, if you go back to the slide, I'll take an opportunity to delve a little bit more deep. So how does this campaign connect with environmental and climate justice. As Robin alluded to earlier in her presentations, we can't just do the issue work without recognizing that we have to also hold elected officials accountable. But then we, as citizens of our local communities and of this democracy, which is under attack, and I'll come back to that, we have the opportunity to decide who represents us in office, in elected offices. And it's important for us to participate in the electoral process as people of faith, but then also support communities who are often, and individuals who are often victims of injustice around the many issues that we care about, particularly environmental and climate justice in this context, to make sure that they are registered to vote and that they participate in the electoral process. So our goals for this campaign are right there on the screen, and we have been actively working, going as far back as the spring, working with local churches, pastors, and justice leaders to participate in the electoral process. We are actively right now engaged in a voter outreach work in low voter turnout communities, particularly in Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia. This is part of our partnership with Center for Common Ground, led by one of our own UCC leaders, Andrea Miller, where we're sending postcards to voters, particularly African-American voters who did not participate in the past elections. So your congregation has an opportunity to participate in that work and join this campaign. And again, this is a way for you to continue your passion around environmental climate justice, but more importantly, continue your work around justice. Next slide, please. So why this campaign, you may ask, in terms of the Faith and Democracy campaign? The reason why is because voting in our democracy is under attack. The very foundations of our democracy are in danger. We cannot ignore and deny the fact that we're seeing across the country states who are enacting laws to restrict and deny people's right to vote under the false pretense of combating voter suppression and trying to restore election integrity, all while ignoring the long history of voter suppression to limit participation of specific groups of people from voting to negatively influence the outcome of the elections. And we're seeing and have seen the same old arguments and rules used to oppose the civil rights movement and racial equity are still being used today in Congress, particularly the US Senate, to deny debate and consideration of the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act, which would strengthen voting and address the issue of voter suppression in elections across this country. Next slide. There's no question that we are living in challenging times, and our current body politic and political environment continues to fail the vast majority of God's people. The forces of racism, homophobia, misogyny, militarism, xenophobia, corporate statism, anti-democratic and fascist. And Ina, you mentioned a new word that I hadn't even heard before as well, continue to threaten the building of God's beloved community. And sadly, we even have those in the faith community, I believe, who are disrepresenting the gospel of Jesus Christ and the prophets of the sacred text. And what we're facing here is we're dealing with what I would say fascism, forces of fascism in particular, who are beginning to try to impact and change our democracy and move it more and more closer to being a fascist state under the auspice of white Christian nationalism. All of these forces, all of these beliefs, they are diametrically opposed to God's vision of the beloved community. And I believe a strong functioning democracy gives us the best opportunity to live in a world where people can live into God's purposes for their lives and to be in community with one another with no threats, rather, that should say, to their existence and their living. Next slide. We can't speak enough about what happened at the nation's capital back on January the 6th. And I believe that there's no moral cause more urgent right now than protecting and advancing the right to vote, because it determines who makes the laws who sets the structures of how we live and how we operate in this country. And we know that that also impacts the issue of environmental and climate justice. These issues are interconnected. And I believe coming together as people of faith to organize and fight for justice, that we can begin to ensure that our nation doesn't become an authoritarian state and instead moves closer and closer to a true democracy. Next slide. So our Faith and Democracy campaign, we did this back in 2020. We designated a Sunday in September to be Faith and Democracy Sunday, and this year it's September 11th. We're calling on churches across the conference and the Eastern Virginia Association of the Southern Conference. Yes, we are in partnership with our Faith and Democracy campaign with our neighboring conference, the Southern Conference, that includes the other third of the Virginia, because our conference geographical boundary only covers 2/3 of Virginia, as well as North Carolina. So we're happy that those local churches are participating, as well as their conference leadership. And this is a time for churches to gather at their worship location or online to be in prayer for voters whose voice is not valued, who experience voter suppression. It's a time to reflect biblically and theologically on what it means to be people of faith, to engage in a democratic process, and to support the least of these, to learn more about our Faith and Democracy campaign efforts, and to highlight the work that your local congregation has been doing thus far in the campaign, and then to prepare for the general election by supporting voters with ongoing information and encouraging them to get out to the polls and vote. So you can sign up for the Faith and Democracy Sunday. We're trying to finalize an organizing packet, a worship packet that we can make available to you so that your worship team can develop the worship for that Sunday seamlessly and do that in collaboration with others across the conference. Next slide. And then I already talked about this voter education and empowerment initiative in partnership with Center for Common Ground. We have churches already in Virginia, Maryland, and DC that are sending postcards, particularly to voters in Virginia. And just earlier this week, we announced that postcarding is now beginning to happen in North Carolina and Georgia. So if your church wants to do this, you can click on that link. In fact, John, if you can click on that link at the bottom of the screen, just to take people there to the page. This is where you would go to sign up to be a part of the initiative. And if you scroll down further on that page, John, we lay out how your local church can participate in the campaign. First, by joining the Faith and Democracy campaign and using one of your existing justice teams to help the congregation participate in this work. Then there's 1 or 2 short videos that you can watch the Center for Common Ground has developed to make sure that people engage in their postcarding efforts effectively and with integrity. And then also to get some support from one of our regional networks. So we have state action networks in Virginia, DC, and Maryland. We're actively trying to build one in New Jersey, but in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, the organizing teams in each of those states are there as a support to local churches who are participating in this, and also available to provide financial support in terms of reimbursement for postcards, as well as support for any postage for the postcards that you would send. So I would encourage you to sign up, look at the training, and reach out to one of the organizing leaders in your state to get additional support if your church is ready to do this work. Back in 2020, our 50+ congregations who were participating in this campaign sent more than 10,000 postcards to states in the South in partnership for Center for Common Ground. So I'm hoping that we could do that, if not surpass that. Go back to the slides, John. Thanks. Next one.
That appears to be all we have.
That'd be all we have. Okay, great. So let me finish it up and say that these are some of the ways in which we would encourage you to get engaged in the work of our Justice and Witness Action Network. It's an opportunity for your church to be connected to other UCC churches in your local community, in your state, in doing the work of justice. And as you see, we are partnering with a number of organizations in the states of the conference, as well as the region, to do this work collectively together, because we recognize we can't do this work by ourselves. But in the context of this environmental and climate justice work, tying it to our Faith and Democracy campaign, we're hoping that after the Faith and Democracy Sunday on September the 11th, there will be opportunities where we'll be mobilizing, organizing our churches to come together in their state to do some public witness, to lift up particular issues that are important to the election. Environmental and climate justice is a very important issue in this election, although we know that the Inflation Reduction Act was just passed in Congress, but there is so much more that needs to be done around these issues, and we need to lift them up and make sure that people understand these issues, and that we hold those who are running for office, hold their feet to the fire to speak to these issues and share with us their position on the issues, because it helps us to make a much more informed decision if we know their position on these issues. So there will be opportunities where we gather to do some public witness, to encourage people to vote, and we want you to be a part of that work moving forward. In addition to that, I just want to say one final word in regards to things that you can do. As part of this ongoing work around this particular initiative with the Air Quality Monitoring Data Collaborative, we're going to continue with a series of workshops that we hope that each of you will participate in, particularly those DC and Maryland churches we know who are participating and receiving the monitor to be a part of the initiative, but also those churches where we're not doing this pilot in DC and Maryland. This is an opportunity for you to come and learn more about an particular environmental justice issue in terms of clean air quality, particularly in this region. It's a chance for you to strengthen your capacity and knowledge around this particular issue, build more relationship with churches and pastors across the conference who are doing this particular work. And then at the conclusion of these workshops, particularly the last workshop, which I'm going to be excited about, we're hoping to prepare you to have more knowledge and training in community organizing. We've heard several stories about how people have used creative tactics to bring about change or try to stop bad things from happening in the community, or to bring public attention to injustices that oftentimes do not get the light of day because news outlets will cover them. So this is called community organizing, and it's important for us to be trained in that work and to know how to do that work and do that work in partnership with one another and our partners. So our last workshop is going to be on an introductory course on community organizing training. So it's important for you to be a part of this work, even if you're not a part of this pilot in DC and Maryland, to do the air quality and to collect the data. So I want to see if there are any final words from our partners who are on the session today, and then see if there's any particular questions that we have of you before we conclude our time this morning. So Robin, Ariel, John, any final words you want to share? And then what I want to do is open it up to any final questions. Robin, any final words, anything you want to say?
Yeah, so I want to thank everybody for coming out and participating in this data that we're trying to collect with air quality monitors is so critical and important in the path forward for the climate, for environment. So please participate, please, do this. And if you want any assistance or help with other resources that Interfaith Power and Light DMV offers, please feel free to reach out to me anytime we want to connect with your congregation. And I want to thank you all for participating. So we're here for you, and I'm here for you. Thanks.
Yeah, and
Yes.
No, go ahead.
No,
Okay.
are you sure? You go ahead.
I just wanted to stress that this is the beginning, but not the end of what the network is going to be doing. This is a pilot program for this particular effort, but good stuff is coming to a venue near you if you're outside the DC Baltimore area. So just hang tight with me. I'm going to be doing this for a good long time. So we'll get there. And I'll let you go now, Ari. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, completely fine. I guess I just wanted to say on behalf of everyone here, thank you, Reverend Silva, John, and Robin for such an informative and passionate workshop. Yes, definitely. We are excited. The Siege team is excited to move forward with this initiative. As we've heard throughout the presentations, this is extremely important work, not only for us right now, but future generations and the youth. And, you know, everybody has a chance to make a difference in this space. It doesn't matter what age you are, you know, we can all make a difference. And, you know, we have the opportunity to start making a difference, whether it's incrementally or immediately. And I think this is something amazing we're a part of. So we hope you are going to be present for the next upcoming workshops. We're definitely going to be getting into the meat of a lot of things. So yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having this workshop, Reverend Silva and John and Robin. And thank you for all who came out.
Thank you, thank you. And let me see if there are any final questions, comments that any of you have who joined us today before I share some final pieces of information and words. Ready to get to your Saturday and enjoy the outside? It's nice out, at least where I'm at. So in the chat, I just put information on the Faith and Democracy campaign, the link to the webpage, so you can go there and learn more about the campaign. You can sign up for Faith and Democracy Sunday. You can sign up for postcarding through our Voter Education and Empowerment Initiative. And you can get the organizing manual as well, so that you can learn more about how to engage your congregation in nonpartisan civic engagement. We're not telling people who to vote for or how to vote. We're providing them with critical information and support to participate in the electoral process. And then I want to thank John in particular, because he developed the Environmental and Climate Justice Network webpage, which I also included in the chat as well. And it has all the information, or at least most of the information that was shared today. It has the information on the initiative, the list of workshops, and in particular, mark your calendar now. The next workshop is scheduled for September 12th. So that's Monday, September 12th, from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And it's going to be on air quality basics. And this will be led by Professor Sakobi Wilson with the University of Maryland, Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health. So you will have a chance to meet him, experience his passion and knowledge for this work, and prepare you for the work that we will do together by collecting this data. And finally, I just wanted to say thank you, Robin. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, John. Thank you, Laura. I know that you are dealing with COVID's symptoms right now, but I appreciate your leadership on the UCC Council for Climate Justice and for helping us prepare for today's workshop, and for your ongoing leadership in making this initiative possible here in the Central Atlantic Conference. And again, thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy Saturday schedule. This recording, the slides, information will be made available, and we look forward to being on Zoom with you again on September 12th. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Blessings and prayers for peace.